Hello and a warm welcome to Federal's special program, Capital Beat. Now, new revelations in the NEET paper leak case are coming out every day. And this after nationwide protests hitting the roads everywhere. Now, in the latest development, what has happened is, and this is just a short while back, this development has taken place. Ravi Atri, who's the alleged mastermind behind the NEET UG 2024 paper leak, has been arrested by the UP task force. Now, his modus operandi, which has come to light, is that he used to upload the solved papers on social media platforms through a network called the Solver Gang. Now, this is something which is very, very frightening, and it seems that it was a very, very well coordinated activity which was happening. We'll try and speak on this as well. But of course, the center, what is it doing now? It has enforced the Public Examinations Act 2024 to curb the malpractices in the examinations. And this carries a jail term of 10 years with a fine of 1 crore. But a whole lot of questions are there that how will the accountability be fixed? Should the National Testing Agency be dissolved? Because the opposition is also now gunning for the government that somebody has to be held responsible. Will it be the education minister? Will the buck stop at the prime minister's table? Joining me now is former IPS officer Yashovardhan Azad. So thank you so much for joining. We have Rashida Hussaini, who's a youth activist from Yuva Hallabol, and hopefully I'll be joined by the JNU professor Ajay Gudavardi also. And I'll begin. I think he's joining already. Yes, Professor Ajay Gudavardi is there. So thank you so much for joining. I'll come to you, but I'll start the debate with Mr. Azad. Mr. Azad, with this latest development that Ravi Atri is the alleged mastermind who has been arrested by the UP task force. And the very fact that the modus operandi, he used to upload the solved papers through a social media network called the Solver Gang. So how deep is this rot? Looking at the fact that, he was doing it in such a coordinated manner.
See, the rot is very, very deep, Neelu. The issue is that this, in fact, this entire exercise is beyond politics and is beyond regimes, because the mafia has been there existing for a long time. The Solvers Gang in UP put it on the social media, and the Solvers Gang in Bihar approached somebody else and then approached the students and then took money, each 40 lakhs or 50 lakhs. And similarly, there is a gang there in Gujarat, in Godhra, where everyone, whether it's from Jharkhand and other places, they are trying to go and appear for exams. So obviously, this means that the leak is pervasive. The issue is the education minister got confused with the definition of the leak. That, certain centers it has happened. Now, the next day itself, Neelu, people knew that there are leaks have taken place. Now, we exactly don't know. Tomorrow, there might be another explosive information like you have given just now about the Atri gang. So, in effect, what it means is that, and earlier on, the definition was that even 5 centers it has leaked. It's called a leak. And therefore, you have to have a re-exam. So what should have been done by the National Testing Agency was that the 5th itself you got to know, in fact, a day before. So when you came to know that there is a leak, you should say that this is vitiated, the exam process is vitiated, and a re-exam has been announced. This was not done. Now, the NTA itself, there are 70 papers which have leaked in the last 7 years, various exams. Now, if this is happening in the state and the center, obviously something is happening, I would say, even beyond the intentions. It is the, in Hindi we say, akarmanyata. You're aksham. You're incapable of holding the exams. Then why are you having an institution like this? And mind you, in NTA, nobody talks as a Director General of NTA, who's a very senior IS officer. No action has been taken for the last so many years for so many leaks. So one point is, what do you do about the NTA? Should you keep it in this form? The other is, even the state governments have failed. Bihar government or Gujarat government or the other governments. I mean, how do you allow such people, the junior engineer, a corrupt junior engineer who's known for doing all these things, who's already been arrested, and you were not able to apprehend this kind of thing in Bihar. Similarly, in Gujarat, that center is known where people are appearing for that, and there was nothing done on that count because there again a lots of money was taken. And in Jhajjar, for example, Needu, when you are starting an exam late, there is the issue of grace marks. If you started the exam half an hour late, give them half an hour more.
Exactly.
These decisions could have been taken at that particular level. But there is a huge issue. The huge issue is Alok Sharma, who has gone to the Supreme Court, is asking for information that who are these people, why those sitting in one row have got the highest marks. For example, what were their marks in class 12? And what was their average marks during the coaching exams which they were giving? That gives you an idea. The coaching institutes guys can also tell you what category is he? Is he 70%er, 90%er, or 80%er? So all this just shows that the exam need to be cancelled. And I'm surprised. I mean, I was expecting the home court, the Supreme Court, to throw the file back to the government and say, start governing. What are we doing? Is Supreme Court going to manage exams? Is Supreme Court going to tell you to do this? So I hope before 8th of July, this decision is taken and the exam is re-announced for those students. And one last point, Neeru, it's very unfortunate that our guardians and parents are pushing these kids and giving money to the extent of 35 to 40 lakh for these malpractices just to push their kids into doctory and engineering. It's a very sad tale on their behalf.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, let me come to Professor Ajay Gudawardi. Now, the UGC NET exam also has been cancelled. What is happening with the NEET, everybody is seeing. And the CSIR NET exam also has been cancelled now. So what is this paper leak now doing to the entire education system? And how does one look at the problems? Now, look at the modus operandi, which has just come out. In one of the latest developments, you had not joined at that time. Ravi Atri, the alleged mastermind, has got arrested. He used to upload the solved papers through a social media network called the Solver Act. So, how does yes, Professor Ajay Gudavadi, I don't know if you can hear me, but your frame seems to be frozen. But I really wanted your reaction on this, that what has it done to the education system, to the credibility of an agency like National Testing Agency? Okay, Rashida, I'll come to you now. How do you really see this problem now? You are an activist yourself. You're fighting for this campaign. What has it done now to the credibility of this entire education system? Because people have started saying that this looks like an education emergency in the country.
Absolutely, absolutely. So even before, as a youth activist, I would say I was in Kota for 3 years as a NEET aspirant, right? So this is not something new, right? So I was in Kota between 2015 to 2017. Paper leak happened in 2015. Another year, consecutive year, 2016, there was another paper leak, right? And what we are seeing right now has been like multiple paper leaks year after year, different exams, right? What does it tell you about the education system? First, there absolute like skepticism. You don't know what's happening. There is no confidence in the education system. But also, you're hitting the vulnerable first, right? So, of course, when the question comes of like why are students opting for it or like what's happening, but like as someone who has been in Kota for 3 years, I've dedicated like entirely in terms of time, in terms of what we have had resources, well, everything is being put into making sure that what we are doing right. By the end of 2-3 years, if there is going to be an exam and the next day you wake up and there's just paper leak, right, you don't know with the uncertainty what to do with it, right? For students, for youth, this has to, anyone who is serious about this country has to take this on priority. This issue has to be spoken about in terms of with action, what needs to be taken next, right? It has to be, and what Yuva Halabol has been doing, right, for past 6-7 years, we've been asking to make sure that this issue will become a mainstream issue, and actions that needs to be taken in terms of holding people accountable who are in power, right? So of course there has to be
But Rashida, there's one bit which needs to be clarified. As a student, as an activist, what do you feel? The pace at which the investigations are happening into the case, is it satisfactory? Catching somebody like Ravi Atri, is that enough? how will the accountability be held if it doesn't go up to the top?
Absolutely laughable, right? Because it's not something that this seems like a glitch in the system right now. It's not something that happened once, right? And like you hold one person accountable, or say even for that matter agency accountable, right? It has to go beyond it. It has to be go beyond in terms of leadership, right? Like the higher you go up, right? Because if this is happening, it's not happening in isolation, right? There are multiple states involved, there are different stakeholders, and of course there is people profiting from this, right? But at the cost of students lives, right? At the cost of lives of the youth of this country, right? So definitely with the pace with people being held accountable, I'm glad in terms of at least there's some action, but absolutely nothing compared to what needs to be done in terms of the emergency that it poses. Because then again, like we are predominantly youth country, right? And there's people suffering for important exams. These are like NEET exams for doctors, right? UGC net. So really shameful pace, and so much more that needs to be done.
Right. So much more that needs to be done. Mr. Azad, I'll come to you now. The way the system is handling this crisis, this is almost like an education crisis. At the moment, the parents, the students, they don't know that the examinations, if they are announced, and the examination which the students will undergo will really meet a logical end. Now, the paper leaks have been happening like over the years. The NEET paper leak has just happened recently. But even before that, as far as the railway recruitment exam is concerned, and a whole lot of protests were happening in UP as well. So for so many years, paper leak has become such a big issue. But how will the political regimes now handle it? Just by nabbing few people here and there, do you think that the system can be cleansed only by arresting a few people? Whereas
No,
the
not
deep, yes, yes, Mr.
Not at all. Not at all. You're absolutely right, and you raised a very critical question. You see, even in the case of Bihar police, which has done a brilliant job, it has caught that solver gang, it has caught the middlemen, and it has also caught some of the students who were participating this in exercise. The question is, the National Testing Agency is not even giving the question papers which they have asked for. That shows that at what level the education ministry wants to do an inquiry of its own. In the CRPC, there's no such rule. I mean, if the police investigation is on, you're bound to appear before it. And that's why by catching a few people here and there, that's not the solution. And mind you, the solution is not that every time there'll be a leak and then you'll catch the people and they'll be punished after 16 years when the judgment comes. The issue is prevention. And you know what, Neelu? In China, the same exam is held in which 1.5 crore people sit for the Gao Cow or whatever that exam is called. The military is used, the drones are used, for the transport, the military vehicles are used, and everywhere it is under the top supervision. And there is never a paper leak. Now, my question is, I consider NEET exam and the G exam for the IIT as more important than the exam for the IAS and the IPS. Because this is for the brilliant doctors and engineers, which are desperately required for the country. Civil servants are not required that much. And for these exams, that is why, if this is the priority, this is the kind of priority you should associate with it. Use the paramilitary. Use whatever you have to have. But don't allow these third-rate corrupt institutions. You can
No, but
put them
Mr.
in
Azad, the question is, you pointed out a very important thing. You said that use the paramilitary, and if China can use drones, if China can use all sorts of surveillance devices, why is India unable to do it? Is there a lack of political will? Is there a lack of seriousness, or the political class thinks that no, it can be handled casually? We can leave it to the institutions like National Testing Agency, and they will conduct the examinations the way they like.
It's a very casual approach. You know, the National Testing Agency is handled by a DG rank IAS officer. There's no action been taken against any IAS officer who helms the National Testing Agency for the last 7 years. Nobody talks even about it. In no debate, this issue has come. Whereas in 10 debates so far, I have mentioned that. If you suspend one of them, at least you'll get some result. So it's always catching a few flunkies here and there, and the issue's over. And you know, the in 2010, the leak which was there, those people have been punished now after 14 years. What impact will the new act have? If whether you increase the punishment to 5 years or 10 years, do you think it will make a difference?
So, do you
So
think that this new examination act, which they have brought in, which they have enforced from Friday, it's just a sort of a cosmetic damage control which the government is trying to do?
to the world over, Neelu, I mean, enhancement of punishment has
Hmm.
not led to reduction of crime.
Right.
You know, better governance, better implementation, better infrastructure, and better people. That's the way you can fight this mess. Otherwise, and it's your right, it's becoming an education emergency at this rate.
All right. Now, Professor Ajay Gudavardi is there. Earlier, he got disconnected while he was speaking to us. Ajay Gudavardi, thank you so much for joining. This huge education crisis which the country is facing, and you are a professor yourself. Now, when you speak to the students, what is the kind of reaction you are getting? Because the government is totally in a damage control mode. We do not know how serious they are about stemming the rot and stemming it right from the roots. Nobody is sure of that, but they are making few random arrests here and there. They have brought in a law. They are saying it will be enforced now with a 10 years jail and 1 crore punishment. 1 crore penalty. Now, is that really going to solve the problem which the country is staring at? This huge education emergency.
Yes, Nilo. So the question really right at the heart of it, which I think your show has partly addressed, is that is this issue to be treated like that of a crime, or has it got to do something deeply with the political vision of the current regime and the ruling elite across? That is the key question as far as I'm concerned. And as I can clearly see, that the vision of centralizing exams under NEET, having an all India exam cutting across all the states, irrespective of the kind of crisis we saw with the NEET, students committing suicides in Tamil Nadu and elsewhere, and students have been demanding for last 7 years that they should not have this kind of centralization. But the current regime has consistently been pushing complete centralization, because for them uniformity of a kind leads to unification, and it is linked to their nationalist agenda. So I don't think these are two very separate issues. I certainly don't think this can be treated just as a criminal issue. I don't think having extra force and vigilance and surveillance is going to solve the problem. The problem really is about certain kind of decentralization, that state governments, independent agencies. Look at similar crisis with NTA. Why did we have NTA? I'll take the example of my own universities. We had 50 years perfect examination system, but that examination system was squarely linked to autonomy of respect, deep respect for autonomy of teachers. We set our own question papers, we frame our own syllabus, we teach our students, and we also evaluate our students, knowing them personally. We continue to evaluate. We did the same with our entrance exam, and we had a subjective entrance test. We had long answers because we are a research institution. What did the NTA do? It, one, converted into objective types. Two, it had an absolutely mediocre question paper. Can you imagine? It had questions dealing with somebody, where is certain institution physically located, this author wrote, how many chapters did this author's certain philosopher's book have? Absolute mediocre question paper. So the entire thing has to deeply do with political, one, centralization, two, dumbing down higher education, converting into objective type, absolutely with no critical thinking involved. These are the deep reasons behind why we have had NTA. NTA has not been able to handle entrance tests. Even where they have been successful, students have come and complained of absolute mediocre quality of questions. So I think we have to revert back. We are a nation of too much of diversities. We are a nation which needs multi-layered approach, whether it is for political decisions, whether it's about federalism, or whether it's examination system. Simply having this idea of one standardized thing by a social political group like RSS, which talks about Indian way of life, this standardized idea is a very classical European idea of nation state. Everything is homogenized, having common language, common uniformity. So this is right at the heart of the rot. Apart from the fact that higher education for last 10 years has been suffering lack of funding.
Question. I'm taking cue from what you're saying. How does one puncture this over centralization which has crept into the education system? How does one deal with it currently? given the system you are functioning in, given the kind of damage control which the government is trying to do, if you have to puncture in that over centralization which has already taken place, what does one do? How do you start dismantling those layers?
I mean, the inefficiency of having centralized system. Many of us have written and have been continuously cautioning the current government that centralization does not work in India, because you have, forget even about basic efficiency of holding an exam. Even in terms of syllabus, in terms of language, you have so much of variation that you simply cannot afford to have one type of exam. That's the key bottom line. If this regime has been completely refusing to listen, because this is part of RSS long term, like one nation, one language, one nation, one market, one nation, one election. It is one nation, one exam. It's a complete follow up of the larger vision. It is not just simply a question of crime happening at one level or leakage happening, which might be an additional problem. That what has this vision got to do with this kind of leakages? Why higher education has been run down for last 10 years, including funding being cut? Those are the other larger problems. The only solution is that we'll have to build public pressure for Education Minister Mr. Dharmendra Pradhan to give up this skewed and this completely faulted vision of having a unified examination system. Allow each university to set its own mandate, have a quality monitoring system if you're really interested. And look at the complete irony of the situation, that you lead to unification, uniformity, which leads to more mediocrity. You're not raising your standards by doing this. How do you explain these two things? So my suggestion would be, Neelu, that we should have, if you want a quality monitoring system, you can have with a decentralized examination pattern, decentralized syllabus making, give more autonomy to teachers. If you want to have a monetary system, that's a different matter altogether.
Right. Now, let me come in for the quick concluding remarks. I'll come to you now, Rashida, that for you now, if there has to be a public movement, you're an activist yourself, and now if you have to build a public movement around this education emergency, what are the first 2-3 steps which you will really take? What are you going to ask the political class to do? And how will this public pressure be built in the coming days?
So we're already seeing what's happening on the streets. The youth will take over eventually, but the movement that's been in the process and building. But I think first step has to first acknowledge, right? Where is the leadership? Like I see by default, there's denial, right? Paper leak happened, but by default, the immediate reaction was to deny. Deny, it was a scam. Like how many scams, right? This feels like the system has accommodated this, right? This is not yet another scam. The structure itself, how it's working, feels like something that's very much like is part of the system, right? So first, from the leadership to acknowledge this is a serious issue, to take it as an emergency, and second, I would say to also, like in terms of before action, to also apologize. I feel like with youth, in terms of like how much the damage that is done, I would sincerely do with some like being humble about this and to apologize to begin with, right? Yes, they passed the bill, but then 10 days later there was another leak, right? So even before implementing, like, right, bills and policy and action implementing will take time, and I absolutely agree with like decentralization of this system, but as well as to begin with, it has to start from there, and then there's a movement when the youth will ask for accountability, ask for questions, they will be responsible. But before anything puts into place, I think these things will have to come first as just like a first step, like baby steps.
Right. Okay, so these are the 3 first steps. You said that the regime should acknowledge, they should not be in a denial mode, and then they should take it as an emergency and apologize for what has happened. Now, Mr. Azad, given the DNA and the character of the Modi government, apology and acknowledging the problem is something which is very, very far-fetched. And at this point of time, can we imagine Prime Minister coming and saying and apologizing to the students that, look, I'm sorry, this kind of a rot has taken place and I'll try and stem the problem? Can we imagine Dharmendra Pradhan to come forward and do a thing like this? So how will this basic step, if that is missing and if the government is not doing it, so how do we see the things unfolding then, as what Rashida said?
Well, I totally agree with Rashida. It will be a very graceful gesture on the part of the Prime Minister to apologize, because after all, it is a kind of an emergency. You see, if Prime Minister has spoken to the students at length on Pariksha Pe Charcha, so when you're talking to the students on Pariksha Pe Charcha, telling them not to get tense, then on such an important thing, which is virtually destroying the lives of these students, there should be, he should come out and, in fact, it will enhance his stature rather than, belittle it. That's number one. Number two, why I totally believe that there should be autonomy in the higher institutions, and this kind of centrifugation is wrong. But as far as exams go, for at least the IIT and the NEET, the system has to be maintained, and for that, you have to do it. In China, given the importance of these exams, they used everything, whatever you have, you throw in your mind, but see that the purity of the exercise is maintained, because we need more doctors and engineers. These are the critical to our country more than the civil services exams for our exams like IPS and IAS. And therefore, I think it is time to disband this NTA, take proper, investigation to its ultimate level, where that everyone is caught, whether it's UP. And because there'll be more, skeletons coming out of the cupboard, it's important right now to finish these exams, say that they are over, and announce a re-exam for the students so that they can rebuild their lives at least and have some certainty for their future.
Right. All right. For the concluding remarks to you, Ajay Godavarti, what would you say? Of course, decentralization is one thing, but then that's going to again take a lot of time. It will not happen in just a few weeks or months. But how can the government really correct the wrongs which have been? I'm talking about some immediate remedial steps.
I think the immediate remedial step is first to revert back to the old system. You first disband NTA. There's absolutely no need to have a national testing agency. It makes no sense in a country like India, where you cannot compare students studying in Delhi with students studying in Odisha or students studying in remote parts in Telangana. What sense does it make? Education system is not about the entrance point. Education system is about what opportunities and training you give once they've entered the system. It is just a qualifying mark, which should be enabling, not a punishing system. If you see the UPSC system, what grade selection process it happens? All civil servants are trained once they enter into a system. There's nothing absolutely remarkable about the exam or the students who enter into it. That's just a qualifying mark. So I think we have to treat entrance in a country like ours, skewed with tremendous social inequalities, as an enabling exam process of selection, not a process of elimination. Once they're selected, universities, and this has a lot to do with privatization and resource allocations. These are very complex issues. We don't have a time on a TV show to discuss this, but something to do with your vision of higher education. You want to withdraw resources from higher education. You do not want to invest enough in higher education, but just through a strict looking entrance exam, you want suddenly high quality output. That's not going to happen. This higher education is a complex vision of sustained engagement over a long period of time. How did institutions like JNU come up? How did institutions like IITs come up? How did institutions like AIMS come up? They have to be nurtured with continuous, funding process, with a loop system of internal survey mechanisms. It cannot happen by just having one entry point examination which you think can be uniform, and then the quality goes up. So I think the vision is very, very skewed. This is not a workable vision at all. We should disband NTA, go immediately to decentralization, kick in teachers, involve qualified faculty across universities to set in localized examination process. That is what we need to do.
Absolutely. And so we'll have to wait and watch how the government handles this crisis. But it's a huge crisis, and it needs a very, very deep, invasive surgery, especially looking into the wrongs which have been done. And it's almost like the problem is entrenched deeply into the system. And how does one clean this entire system is a very, very big challenge, not only for the political class, but for the teachers, the students, the parents, all the stakeholders in the society. I think so it's really a difficult period for the entire society, I would say. Thank you so much, Mr. Azad, for joining. Rashida, Professor Ajay Godavarti, it was wonderful having you on the program. And one appeal to the viewers who are watching this discussion: subscribe to our channel, send us your feedback, and stay tuned to The Federal. Thank you.